What if I told you that the crucifixion of Jesus was only the beginning, and the real mysteries began right after his final breath? You've heard the story before, Jesus on the cross, his life slipping away. But what happened next is where the plot thickens. From an unexplainable darkness that blanketed the land to a supernatural earthquake that split the ground beneath the cross, the events that followed were unlike anything anyone had seen before. What's even more intriguing is that these occurrences weren't random. They were signs that pointed to something far more profound. So, join me as we unravel 5 shocking mysteries that occurred after Jesus' death, events that defied explanation, altered history, and left behind clues that still challenge us to this day. Are you ready to uncover the secrets hidden in the shadow of the cross? The mysterious darkness that covered the land. It was an afternoon that should have been bright, but darkness unexpectedly blanketed the land for 3 hours during the crucifixion. Imagine the sun bowing out as if nature itself mourned. Skeptics may argue it was a mere solar eclipse, yet even ancient astronomers found the timing puzzling. Solar eclipses don't happen during full moons, yet that day, darkness prevailed. Was it a natural coincidence, or was it the heavens whispering a deeper truth? Could this be a divine commentary on the unfolding event, an ominous sign that something monumental was taking place? Some see this darkness as a supernatural sign, a symbol of judgment or sorrow. It's as if the cosmos itself bore witness to humanity's rebellion, shrouding the world in a shadow to reflect the weight of the moment. In Scripture, darkness often signals God's judgment. Remember the 9th plague over Egypt. But here, the timing raises eyebrows. Why would darkness descend when a man was being executed in one of the most humiliating ways? Was it a proclamation that this was no ordinary death, but one that carried cosmic significance? If you think about it, the symbolism is hard to ignore. Darkness could represent the world's sin being cast upon Jesus, enveloping him as he bore the weight of humanity's transgressions. What better backdrop than a pitch-black sky to highlight the starkness of this sacrifice? But beyond the symbolism, we must ask, could there be more? Could this have been an event designed to awaken hearts and minds, to stir a deep realization of what was being done on that hill called Golgotha? Interestingly, some early Christian writers saw this as a supernatural sign, a moment when the veil between heaven and earth grew thin. Imagine the spiritual forces at work, as if the unseen world collided with our own. Were the forces of darkness rallying in a final desperate attempt? Or was God making a statement so unmistakable that even the most hardened Roman soldier might pause? The fact that even secular historians of the time recorded this strange event adds an intriguing layer to the mystery. Think about it. No crowds would have remained indifferent when the sky went dark. In a culture where celestial signs were seen as divine messages, this was significant. Did the darkness not echo the anguish of the crucified one, or perhaps foreshadow the despair that would soon grip his followers? It's as though the world itself fell silent, its breath held in anticipation. The timing, the duration, the sheer unexpectedness of it all. It begs for answers that go beyond the realm of natural explanations. Scholars have tried to offer scientific explanations, ranging from dust storms to volcanic ash. Yet none of these theories seem to hold up when you consider the timing and the location. If anything, the lack of a clear natural explanation adds to the aura of the event. It's as if God himself was speaking, not in a still, small voice this time, but through a dramatic act that no one could ignore. What message was being sent, and to whom? The darkness wasn't just about obscuring the sun, it was a call to reflect. Imagine being present, hearing the cries from the cross, and feeling the eerie chill of an unanticipated night. There's a profound sense that this darkness wasn't just physical, but spiritual. It reflected a world plunged into moral darkness, one that only the crucified man could ultimately dispel. Was it not fitting, then, that the light of the world endured darkness so we could step into the light? The fact that this darkness coincided with the moment of Jesus' crucifixion hints at more than just a celestial oddity. For some, it serves as evidence that all creation was participating in the drama of redemption. How could the sky itself not react when the very fabric of spiritual reality was being torn apart and reassembled? And what of those who stood there, witnessing both the spectacle and the mystery? Did they realize they were caught in a pivotal moment of divine history? What if the darkness was a final appeal, a divine nudge urging onlookers to reconsider the man on the cross? After all, the world was plunged into darkness, yet from the cross, hope still flickered. Could this have been God's way of inviting a deeper introspection, forcing all who watched to confront the darkness within their own hearts? For those 3 hours, time seemed to stop, and reality itself seemed to bend. It was as if creation was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. The darkness remains a mystery, one that prompts more questions than answers. Was it a sign of divine displeasure, a fulfillment of prophecy, or an unexplainable natural event? Or could it have been all three, intertwined in a moment too profound for human understanding? One thing is clear, no one present that day could have left unchanged. The darkness was more than a backdrop. It was a mirror, reflecting the depth of the crucifixion's impact. The veil of the temple torn in two. The tearing of the temple veil wasn't just a dramatic event. It was like the ripping open of a long-closed door. Imagine the moment. The temple, usually a place of sacred order, suddenly filled with the sound of fabric tearing from top to bottom. This was no small curtain. It was a heavy, ornate barrier that had separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, a place where only the high priest could enter, and even then, only once a year. But now, that dividing line had been shredded as if by an unseen hand. What could this mean for the relationship between God and humanity? To the priests and onlookers, the sight must have been terrifying. The veil represented the boundary between the divine and the human, a clear line marking where God's presence dwelt and where it did not. By tearing it apart, it was as if God himself was declaring that the separation was no longer necessary. The symbolism is potent. The barrier to the divine had been removed. Could this signify that a new way of relating to God was being established, one that didn't require priests or sacrifices? For centuries, the temple veil had acted as a powerful reminder of the distance between a holy God and sinful people. But now, with the veil torn, it was as though God was saying, "Come closer." The timing couldn't have been more meaningful, right at the moment of Jesus' death, as if to declare that his sacrifice was the key to a new kind of access. The tearing of the veil didn't just change the temple, it redefined what it meant to approach God. What had once been reserved for the few was now open to all. Some theologians suggest that this act symbolized the end of the Old Covenant and the beginning of the New. With the temple rituals rendered obsolete, the need for a mediator other than Christ himself had been swept away. Think about that. A single moment that collapsed centuries of religious tradition. It wasn't just the fabric that was torn, but the very framework of how people understood their relationship with God. Was this a divine invitation to experience a more personal connection? If the veil's tearing signified the end of one era, then it also heralded the dawn of another. It was as though heaven and earth had collided, and in the midst of that collision, the rules were rewritten. No longer would God be confined to a specific place or accessible through specific rituals. The event challenges the idea of sacred spaces, suggesting that anywhere could now be a place of divine encounter. What does it mean for a holy God to step into ordinary spaces? The tearing was from top to bottom, an important detail. If it had been from bottom to top, It could be dismissed as human interference, but from top to bottom, how could that be anything but an act of God? It speaks of a divine initiative, an action taken by the Creator himself. Was this a deliberate act to show that God was making the first move to reconcile with humanity? It's almost as if he reached down and tore away the obstacle that kept people at a distance. Imagine the chaos that must have ensued in the temple. Priests would have been scrambling, unsure of what to do next. The veil's tearing would not only have been shocking, but also confusing for those who had relied on the old system. It marked the end of an era, one that some would struggle to let go of. This wasn't just a physical tearing, it was a symbolic upheaval, challenging deeply held beliefs and practices. How many must have wondered if the world had indeed changed forever? For some, the tearing of the veil wasn't just a sign of God's presence becoming more accessible, it was a sign of judgment against the old order. The temple's sacrificial system had been the cornerstone of religious life, yet now its central symbol had been torn apart. Could this act have been God's way of showing that the system had served its purpose and that something far greater had arrived? It's as though the torn veil was announcing the arrival of a new kind of worship. To those who witnessed it, the torn veil may have seemed like the end of something sacred, but was it not, in fact, the beginning of something even more sacred? What had been hidden behind the veil was now brought into the open, a revelation that could not be ignored. It was as if the sacredness that had been confined was being released into the world, ready to be experienced in ways that went beyond rituals and regulations. In the aftermath, questions must have lingered. Was this tearing a call to draw near or a sign to step back and reconsider everything they thought they knew? The veil's destruction left behind more than an open space. It left behind a profound mystery. What had once been clear boundaries between the divine and the human were now blurred, and in that blur lay an invitation to a new understanding, a new relationship, and a new way of seeing God. The earthquake and the resurrection of the saints. When Jesus breathed his last, the earth itself seemed to respond. An earthquake shook the ground, splitting rocks and opening tombs. It was as if creation itself was protesting, unable to stay silent in the face of such a momentous event. But this wasn't just any tremor. It came at the exact moment of his death, almost as though the earth was trembling under the weight of what had just occurred. What could it mean when even the ground beneath one's feet testifies to the significance of a moment? As if the earthquake weren't mysterious enough, there's the startling account of graves opening and many saints rising. Imagine the scene. Tombs cracked open and people long dead walking through the streets of Jerusalem. It sounds almost too extraordinary to be real, yet it's right there in the biblical account. These weren't just any individuals either. They were described as holy people, which adds an intriguing layer. Why would these particular graves open, and what was their appearance meant to signify? Some view the resurrection of the saints as a symbolic foretaste of the greater resurrection to come. It's almost as if the world received a small glimpse of the future, a preview of what's promised to those who believe. The timing, coinciding with the death of Jesus, can't be ignored. Was it a way of showing that death had lost its sting, that the grip of the grave was now weakened? Or was it a sign pointing to the victory that would be declared 3 days later? The earthquake wasn't merely a natural event, it seemed to be a divine reaction. Earthquakes are often linked to God's presence in Scripture, as if the very ground shudders at his approach. Think back to Mount Sinai, or the times when prophets spoke of quakes accompanying divine judgment. But here, the earthquake served a different purpose. It wasn't announcing judgment, but rather the breaking of death's hold. The tremors felt that day shook more than rocks. They shook the very foundations of existence. For the people in Jerusalem, this must have been a deeply unsettling experience. Imagine standing at the foot of the cross, already grappling with the darkness that had covered the land. and then feeling the earth give way beneath you. It's hard to imagine anyone standing there without sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond the ordinary. The combination of darkness, earthquake, and resurrected saints surely left an indelible mark on those who experienced it. How could anyone leave that place without questions burning in their minds? What's truly fascinating is the fact that the resurrection of the saints happened after Jesus' resurrection, not immediately at his death. This delay adds to the mystery, as if it was a signal that Christ's triumph over death had a ripple effect. The power unleashed at his resurrection didn't just bring him back to life, it had a reach that extended to others, pulling them from the grip of death. Could it be that this was a foreshadowing of what's to come, a sign that Jesus' victory was just the beginning? Some scholars suggest that the saints' resurrection was a testimony to the spiritual shift that took place with Jesus' death. It's as if the old order was being overturned, and the kingdom of God was making its presence felt in a dramatic way. The graves opened not just to release the dead, but to declare that the hold of death was being shattered. It's like the world was being prepared for a new reality, one in which life and death would never be seen the same way again. One can only imagine the conversations that took place in the days following. What did people make of these resurrected saints? Did they recognize them? And what message did these holy ones carry upon returning from the grave? The text leaves much to speculation, yet the implications are profound. The dead walking among the living would have been an undeniable sign that something had shifted, that the world was not the same as it had been just days before. Could this have been a harbinger of the resurrection that awaits all believers? The earthquake, the opened graves, and the risen saints all point to a world in transition, a shift from the dominion of death to the promise of life. It was more than a coincidence of events. It was a divine statement. The earth itself seemed to acknowledge that something extraordinary was happening, as if the very ground bore witness to the unfolding mystery. And the saints, though risen for a brief time, served as walking testimonies to the power that was unleashed at Calvary. What remains clear is that these events were more than just signs. They were declarations. They weren't just there to be witnessed, they were meant to provoke thought, stir the heart, and ignite a sense of wonder. The earthquake and the resurrection of the saints left behind a lingering question. What does it mean for the living when the dead are brought back to life? And what does it say about the one who caused the earth to tremble and the graves to open? The Roman centurion's declaration. As Jesus hung on the cross, there stood a Roman centurion, a hardened soldier who had seen countless deaths. Yet something about this particular execution stirred him deeply. When Jesus breathed his last, the centurion exclaimed, "Truly this was the Son of God." Imagine the weight of that moment, a pagan officer trained in the arts of war and execution, recognizing something divine in a condemned man. What could have moved him to utter such words, especially when crucifixion was meant to strip away every last shred of a person's dignity? It's not hard to see why the centurion's declaration is considered so significant. This wasn't a follower of Jesus, nor a Jew who was waiting for a Messiah. He was an outsider, someone who had no vested interest in validating the claims of a crucified man. Yet there he stood, struck by what he had witnessed. Could it have been the darkness that enveloped the land, or perhaps the earthquake that followed? Or was there something about Jesus' composure, even in suffering, that spoke to a deeper truth? For a Roman centurion to make such a statement was no small matter. These soldiers were known for their toughness, for being unmoved by the cries and pleas of the condemned. But as he watched Jesus die, something pierced through the layers of discipline and detachment. Some might say he was overwhelmed by the sequence of supernatural signs, while others believe it was the way Jesus faced death itself that drew out his confession. Could this have been a moment when a heart of stone was softened? There's a haunting irony in the centurion's words. The Roman Empire saw its leaders as divine, yet here was a soldier acknowledging divinity in a man who had just been executed by the state. It's almost as though the declaration subverted the whole idea of power and authority. While emperors ruled with an iron fist, here was a king who ruled from a cross, and a Roman was compelled to recognize it. Could this statement have been a subtle challenge to the very foundations of Roman power? The centurion's reaction also speaks volumes about the impact of the crucifixion itself. He wasn't simply moved by the signs and wonders, but by the person of Jesus. There was something about his death that stood apart from the countless others that the centurion had witnessed. Perhaps it was the way Jesus prayed for his persecutors or the resolve in his final words. Whatever it was enough to convince this battle-hardened man that there was something more happening than just another execution. Some suggest that the centurion's declaration serves as a bridge between the Jewish and Gentile worlds. The gospel was not merely a message for the people of Israel. It was a revelation meant for all humanity. The centurion, a Gentile, was among the first to voice the truth about Jesus' divine nature. This unexpected proclamation at the foot of the cross was a sign that the message would spread beyond the boundaries of any one nation. Could this have been the first whisper of a global transformation? The centurion's words didn't just fall on deaf ears. Those around him, perhaps even other soldiers, must have heard the declaration. Did it plant a seed of doubt in their hearts about the events they had just witnessed? Or did it stir curiosity and wonder? One can imagine that in the days following, conversations must have occurred among the ranks, trying to make sense of what they had seen and heard. This simple declaration had the power to ripple out, affecting more than just the man who uttered it. There is a sense of fulfillment in the centurion's statement, as if his words echoed the very purpose of the crucifixion. In that moment, it wasn't just the centurion who spoke. It was as though the truth could not be contained. It burst forth from the mouth of a man least expected to proclaim it. How fitting that the declaration of Jesus' divine nature came not from the religious leaders or his disciples, but from a Roman soldier who had witnessed the events unfold firsthand. The declaration carries a timeless quality. It was spoken in a specific moment, but its significance resonates far beyond that day. It's a reminder that the recognition of Jesus' divinity doesn't come only through theology or tradition, but through encountering the reality of his sacrifice. What was it about that scene that could move a man so far removed from Jewish expectations to acknowledge the Son of God? It seems that the power of the moment transcended cultural and religious boundaries. The centurion's declaration leaves us with a powerful question. What did he see that others missed? There were many witnesses at the crucifixion, yet only a few grasped the true nature of what was happening. The centurion's words invite us to look beyond the surface, to consider whether we too might be standing before something extraordinary without fully recognizing it. Could it be that in that one confession, a deeper truth was being revealed to the world? The guarding of the tomb and the empty grave. After Jesus' death, the authorities took no chances. They remembered his words about rising again on the third day, and the last thing they wanted was for his followers to stage a resurrection by stealing the body. So they sealed the tomb and stationed guards to prevent any tampering. Imagine the scene. A tomb secured like a fortress, with soldiers standing vigil over a lifeless body. But despite all the precautions, the unexpected still happened. The grave was found empty. How could a guarded and sealed tomb suddenly become an open, vacant space? The measures taken to secure the tomb speak to the authorities' anxiety. They feared that the disciples might attempt some deception, yet they couldn't have anticipated what actually transpired. The guards were not amateurs. These were trained soldiers accustomed to keeping watch and following orders. Yet come Sunday morning, their vigilance counted for nothing. The heavy stone was rolled away and the body was gone. It was a mystery that defied logic, and even the most skeptical had to acknowledge the strangeness of it all. Some suggest that the empty tomb is the strongest evidence for the resurrection. After all, if the body could have been produced, surely it would have been, putting an end to the followers' claims. But no body was ever found, and the guards, who were tasked with preventing exactly this kind of situation, could offer no explanation. Could it be that what happened there was beyond human capability, an event orchestrated by a power that no guard could resist? The mystery only deepened as stories of sightings of the risen Jesus began to spread. The reaction of the guards themselves adds an interesting layer to the story. According to some accounts, they were struck with fear when they saw an angel roll back the stone. Imagine these hardened soldiers, men who had faced death in battle, now trembling and falling as though dead. What could have caused such a response, if not something truly supernatural? Their experience was so unsettling that they were later bribed to spread the story that the disciples had stolen the body while they slept. It seems even the truth had to be covered up. There's something almost ironic about the precautions taken to guard the tomb. The more the authorities tried to secure it, the more spectacular the empty tomb became as a sign. Their efforts to suppress any possibility of a resurrection only magnified the event when the body went missing. It's as if the harder they tried to control the outcome, the more evident it became that something extraordinary had happened. Could it be that the sealed tomb, meant to keep Jesus in, was actually what showcased his escape? The empty grave quickly became the focal point for the followers of Jesus. For them, it wasn't just a symbol of a missing body. It was a sign that death had indeed been defeated. The empty tomb wasn't just about what was no longer there. It was about what was coming to life. To the disciples, it meant that the resurrection was real, that the promise of new life had been fulfilled. It sparked a movement that spread like wildfire, challenging even the might of the Roman Empire. How could a mere absence of a body cause such a shift in history? For skeptics, the empty tomb has always been a point of contention. Some propose that the body was stolen, while others suggest it was moved by authorities. Yet these theories struggle to explain the rapid spread of the resurrection message and the willingness of Jesus' followers to face persecution and death for their claims. It's one thing to lie for a cause, it's another to die for a lie. What did those early believers see and experience that gave them such unshakable conviction? Even today, the empty tomb remains a powerful symbol, one that challenges the boundaries of human understanding. It stands as a testament to an event that defies conventional explanations. In a world where evidence is king, the absence of a body speaks louder than words. It invites both faith and skepticism, provoking questions that have endured for centuries. Could it be that the tomb's emptiness points not to a missing piece, but to the presence of something far greater? The story of the guarded tomb and the empty grave doesn't just raise questions, it demands a response. For those who believe, it's a call to embrace the resurrection and what it signifies. For those who doubt, it's a puzzle that refuses to go away. Either way, the event has left its mark on history. The sealed tomb couldn't contain Jesus, and the empty grave continues to inspire, intrigue, and challenge people to this day. What does it mean that the one who was thought to be dead is alive? Ultimately, the guarded tomb and the empty grave present a paradox that has captivated minds for centuries. It's a story that begins with precaution and ends with wonder. What seemed like the ultimate defeat turned out to be the beginning of something unimaginable. The mystery of the empty tomb is not just about a missing body, it's about a profound truth that has the power to change everything. What happened that night remains one of the greatest mysteries ever told. As we close this exploration of the mysteries surrounding the crucifixion, one thing is clear: these events weren't just historical curiosities. They were signs meant to awaken something within us, to challenge our understanding, and to invite us into a deeper reality. The darkness that covered the land, the tearing of the veil, the trembling earth, the resurrection of the saints, and the empty tomb, they all point to a truth that goes beyond the surface. But what do these signs mean for you today? Could it be that they're calling you to see beyond the ordinary and step into a life where the extraordinary is possible? If these mysteries have stirred something in you, why not take a moment to reflect? What does the tearing of the veil say about your own access to God? Could the empty tomb be more than a symbol? It could be an invitation to embrace a life where hope triumphs over despair. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What are your questions, your doubts, your hopes? And if you're looking to draw closer to God and enrich your spiritual life, you're not alone. Many feel the same longing, the same desire for something more. That's why our ebook, 30 Habits to Draw Closer to God, was created. It's more than just a guide. It's a pathway to transforming your routine and deepening your connection with the divine. Imagine the peace that comes from living each day in tune with God's presence. The journey starts with one step, and this ebook can help you take it. Check it out in the comments and start your spiritual transformation today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content that dives deep into the mysteries of faith. Let's continue this conversation, share messages of hope, and keep exploring the profound truths that lie just beyond the veil. There's always more to uncover, so keep watching, keep questioning, and keep growing.